In this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to get your first PHP file up and running. So we're going to set everything up that we need to set up. We'll create a PHP file, and then we'll actually print something out onto the screen so we can make sure everything is working correctly. So let's get started. The first thing that we have to do when we're working with PHP is we actually have to start something called a PHP server. Now, basically, when we want to use PHP, we have to run PHP on a web server. So PHP is what's called a server-side language. Basically means it's a programming language that's going to run on a web server, and we can use PHP on that web server in order to interact with our websites. So your website is basically just a collection of files that gets given to the user, and we can write PHP on the web server, which is going to handle like giving out files to users or getting input from users and doing stuff like that. So basically all you need to know is that PHP is going to run on a web server. And you don't really need to understand any more than that just as a beginner to PHP. And I'm going to show you guys how we can set up our very own web server. And actually a web server comes with PHP, so it's really easy. So what I want to do is I want to open up my terminal or my command prompt. Now, if you're on Mac, it's going to be called the terminal. If you're on Windows, it's going to be called the command prompt. And then I'm just going to come down here and just search for the command prompt. I'm going to search CMD because I'm on Windows. If you're on Mac, just search for terminal, and I'm going to open this up. And the command prompt and the terminal are basically just two programs which will allow us to interact with the computer using text commands. That's essentially all you need to know. And over here, we're actually going to start a web server. So you can just type in PHP, and I'm going to type hyphen, a capital S, and then I'm just going to type localhost colon 4000. And then I'm going to click enter. Essentially what we're doing here is we're creating a web server. So we're using PHP, and PHP is going to create like a little web server for us. And as a beginner to PHP, this is essentially all you need. So we can use this server that PHP is going to create for us in order to run our PHP files. You can actually use a different web server if you want. Setting up another web server on your computer is going to take a while, and you're going to have to do a bunch of configuration. You're going to have to download a bunch of things. So as a beginner, the easiest way to get started is to just use this PHP hyphen capital S localhost 4000 command. And you'll see over here, it basically just says PHP 7.1.11 development server started. So this is like a little web server that we can use. And you'll see over here it says listening on HTTP localhost 4000. So localhost it's essentially just like the web address of your local computer. And this basically just means that we have a web server running on our local machine, and it's running on port 4000. And then down here you'll see it says document root is C/users/Mike D. Now, if you're on OS X, this might be different. It's probably still going to be like users and then your username. So that's basically where PHP is going to start looking for files that we're going to run. So now that we have our server set up, you want to just leave this running. So don't exit out of this window. I'm just going to minimize it, but make sure that you don't exit out of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here in my file explorer, and I'm going to go to that document root. So if you remember, it was users and then my username. So I'm just going to go down here, and we'll go to users and then Mike D. So this is where that document root was. In other words, this is where PHP is going to start looking for files that we want to run. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to create a new folder here. So I'm just going to click new folder. And I'm just going to call this folder www. So www is just going to stand for like our website. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm just going to name mine www. And now what I want to do once I have this www folder created is I want to create a PHP file. And to do that, I'm actually going to open up my text editor. So over here, I'm going to open up Atom, which is the text editor that we installed in the last tutorial. And if you're not using Atom, then you can just use whatever text editor that you want. It doesn't really matter. And in here, I'm basically going to import this folder. So I'm just going to come up and say File, and I'm going to say Add Project Folder. And now we're just going to go to Users, Mike D, and then we're going to add this www folder. And this is basically just going to let me see it while we're developing. So I'm going to click Select Folder, So now we have www over here in our little navigation window. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to click new file, and we want to create a PHP file. So I'm just going to create a PHP file, and I'm just going to call it site.php. And you can name this whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you name it. I'm going to name this site, and you need to have this .php extension. So I'm just going to click enter, and this file is going to go ahead and get created for us. So once we have this file open, now we can start writing some code. Now here's the thing about PHP is very tightly coupled with a language called HTML. And HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's basically a language that we can use to build websites. So if you've ever built a website before, then you've used HTML. Now, in order to program in PHP, in order to really get everything you can out of PHP, you're going to want to have a good understanding of HTML. By no means do you have to be an expert at HTML, but you should at least understand like what HTML is and how it works and sort of what's going on. I'm just going to kind of assume that you guys have a basic knowledge of HTML. And if you don't know anything about HTML, we actually have an entire course on it here on Draft Academy, so you can check that out. But for this course, I'm just going to assume that you already understand the basics of HTML. So I'm not going to be going over HTML basics. I'm just going to assume that you know it. So this PHP file over here, site.php, this is actually very similar to an HTML file. So essentially, we can write HTML inside of this file, and it's going to work just like it would work with a normal HTML file. For all intents and purposes, a PHP file and an HTML file are the same. It's just that in a PHP file, we can write PHP code, but everything else is pretty much the same, so it'll work the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come over here and just set up a basic HTML skeleton. So here we just have this very basic skeleton for an HTML page, and inside of this HTML page, we're actually going to write our PHP code. So whenever we want to write PHP code inside of an HTML file, we can actually just come down here, and I'm just going to come down here into the body, and we can create special PHP tags. So everything in HTML is a tag, right? So anytime that you're like laying out something or you're doing something, generally you're doing it inside of a tag. And we can create a PHP tag, and inside of that PHP tag, we can write our PHP code. So a PHP tag is very simple. I'm just going to make a less than sign. I'm going to make a question mark, and I'm going to type out PHP. And then I'm just going to make a couple new lines, and you'll see down here we need a question mark and a greater than sign to end it off. So anything that I put inside of these tags is going to be considered PHP code. All right. And I'm just going to show you guys one simple PHP instruction that we can write. And then in the next tutorial, we're going to look at some more instructions. But I just want to show you guys like how we can basically set this up and make sure that everything's working. I'm just going to type out echo, and I'm going to make an open and close parentheses, and I'm going to type a semicolon after this. And in here, I'm going to make an open and close quotation marks, and I'm just going to type out hello world. So I'm saying echo hello world, and this is actually a PHP instruction. And what this is going to do is it's going to print something out onto the screen. So what we can do now is we can save this file, and remember over here I still have my PHP server running, and it's saying document root is users Mike D, and it has this address up here, localhost 4000. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to put this into our web browser. So I'm going to open up my web browser. In my case, I just have Google Chrome. And over here in the address bar, I'm going to put in localhost 4000. Now, when we click enter, you'll notice that it says not found. And that's because there's no PHP files here at the root directory. But if you remember, we stored our PHP file in that www folder. So I can just make a /www, and then I can say /, and I'm going to type in the name of the PHP file. So it was site.php. And so now we're navigating to the folder where we're storing all of our